Hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for our first ever How to Reboot Your Donor Retention series. So we are so excited that you're here and joining us. So sorry we're running a few minutes late, just a few technical difficulties. Always happens at the worst times, right? But so glad that you're here. We're super excited to kick off this conversation today. So before we get started, I just want to cover a few quick, just like ground rules as we get started, just to keep in mind throughout the conversation today. So first and foremost, we want this to be fun and interactive and engaging. So feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat. If there is something that you're also doing that you find to be working, and you want to surface that as well, we'd love to know that. Or something on the opposite hand that you find not to be working and want to, get input from others, then by absolutely all means, feel free to put that in the chat as well. So we want this to be a fun, interactive conversation. This also will be recorded. The recap will be sent out tomorrow as well. So you can find that. So if you need to hop off for any reason, you can always go back and get access to the recording. And lastly, we are just excited that you're here. And for those of you who do not know me, my name is Allie Hammond. I'm our marketing manager here at Virtuous. And I am joined by these lovely people on the conversation on how to build an effective year-end recurring gift program. So super excited. If you guys want to quickly introduce yourselves before we get started.
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, so I'm Max. I'm a customer success manager here at Virtuous. But before working at Virtuous, I spent the entire rest of my career boots on the ground fundraising for nonprofits. And I'm going to be trying to come at you guys from that angle today. Just talk about my experience in nonprofit leadership, major gift fundraising, boots on the ground fundraising, online marketing, all of that fun stuff when it comes to fundraising and nonprofits.
I'll go next. We can just hop down the line here. My name is Katie. I'm a commercial account executive here, which means I get to work with organizations between $2 and $4 million in revenue. I'm going to introduce them to Virtuous, see if they want to invest in it and explore it. I got to work in nonprofit for 8 years. Part of that was with Max, and we used Virtuous for our time in fundraising. So excited to talk to you about our experience and then what we've seen here.
Awesome.
Hey, and I am Tanya Valencia. I'm a product trainer. I think my 3-year anniversary with Virtuous is actually tomorrow. So I've done quite a bit around here, from manual data migrations, coaching people onto the platform. I'm a product trainer now, so I ask people a lot of like, well, what do you mean there? And a lot of my answers are, it depends. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So aside from that, I've got a history in fundraising through high school, college, post that. So I've got a soft spot, of course, for fundraisers, and I'm all about helping technology get out of your way so you can do the work rather than clicking. So.
Love that. And thank y'all so much for joining us today. Virtuous has a ton of nonprofit transplants, so happy to, be able to up level and showcase just the internal talent that we have. So super excited. Before we get started though, I really do want to kick us off with just a quick question, which is, why does generosity matter? And really that goes back to the heart of everything that we do as organizations, is why does generosity matter? And here at Virtuous, we believe that generosity has the power to create profound change in the world and in the hearts of our givers. So with that in mind, it's our mission, our team's mission, to be able to move the needle forward and unlock global generosity by helping nonprofits better connect with and inspire their givers. So that's really at the core of what we do. That's what drives us every day. And really drives the methodology that we help organizations be able to equip your teams and be able to help unlock generosity. And we do that through this methodology that we call responsive fundraising. So some of you might be familiar with this. Some of you, this is a brand new term, totally fine. But really what this is really at the core, helps you be able to connect with all donors personally and give every single donor that major gift donor experience. So we do that through our systems, through our processes, through our people, all working together in harmony to be able to actually help drive and create those personal relationships with all donors at scale. So I want you just to keep that in the back of your mind as we go throughout our conversation today. Really, and just at the core, being able to connect personally with all donors. So I go ahead and stop sharing my screen and kick it over to you guys. But really, just as we get started, I think it's important to really take a step back and understand more so, why does a donor give in the first place? And before we can connect personally with donors, before we dive into, building out a program and what that looks like, um, let's dive into a little bit deeper and, would love to understand from your experiences, what do you think compels donor to give? Why would someone want to make a donation in the first place? And, be able to have that connection to your mission.
Who wants to kick us off?
I can start us off. I think when we're talking about why a donor wants to give, I think the first thing that's important to think about is framing like what is giving. I think we try to think about giving as like giving a monetary dollar gift all the time, but it's good to remember like giving happens in multiple ways, whether it's giving a monetary gift, volunteering, giving an in-kind donation, or even just spreading the word of your mission. Those are all total acts of giving. And I've always found that people want to give to be part of a solution that they care about. Um, Maybe they're members of your church or alumni from your school. People may be affected by your cause in the past, or have family members who have been affected by your cause if you're curing a disease, or maybe helping with homelessness, or maybe they have a pet that they love if you're working in animal welfare. Um, and I think people also stop giving when momentum is lost. They no longer feel like part of the solution anymore, which is why it's really important to think about that responsive framework that Ali mentioned, and make sure you're listening to your donors. Make sure that you're asking for appropriate donation amounts. You never want to be asking for too much from somebody, and then they think, oh, well, I can't help you because I don't have $10,000 to give.
Mhm.
And just make sure you're acknowledging and listening and communicating.
Yeah, I'll jump off of that one. I like that you said generosity is holistic, because there is a lot of different ways that people can give. And I think people, in particular, give to values. So the values of your organization go beyond what you practice internally. It also resonates with people outside of your organization, and people lean into those values. And when they're a part of this long-term solution that also aligns with their values, it only makes sense to them to give. Another thing that I get to talk to a lot of nonprofits every single day, and it's beautiful. But a lot of times I don't see donate buttons on their website. They need to be asked. Like, people need to be asked to participate in a movement, to participate in a mission. And like Max said, that's not always monetary. Can you just spread the word? Invite someone else to this event. Can you repost this social media post on your page? So people need to be asked, and make it really, really easy for them to do it. So I always train myself and my team, like, we need to make it as easy as possible for people to act. They're busy. They have 1,000 people climbing for their attention too. Like, if we can prepare a post for them so that they can share it, just push share. That's great. Optimize your online giving page. Do not have 1,000 things going on. Just make it really, really easy for people to take action.
And to build off of that, as far as keep all of these ideas, I always use the phrase time, talent, and treasure. How is someone engaging with your organization? I like the fact that Katie kept it very broad of communicating, engaging, not like, how does someone donate? How does someone give? It's much more than just a dollar sign. Time, talent, and treasure is what I always boil it down to. And then how do you define that in whatever CRM you're at? Like, volunteering, monetary gifts, in kind. What does that look like in data format?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And it's so true. And people want to help. People want to champion for your cause. That doesn't always look like a financial ask, like you said. And so it's more about, in what ways are we able to help surface and be able to give people the option that's right there in front of them, that makes it easy for them to participate and really be like engaging and champion on your cause, which is great. So if you dive in a little bit further, I'm curious too, from, how do you go about, everyone comes to you from different points, different angles of, why someone gives. Like, it could be a personal connection, like you said, Max, like from someone that they know, be a personal connection to their cause. Like, how do you go about identifying the unique passion points and the reason that someone would give to your organization. How would you get more insights? Go about getting more insights into that.
I can start with that one. For what Max and I worked on a project when we were working together and using Virtuous, and we started with what we had. And you can start anywhere, regardless of if you're using Virtuous or not. Just start with what you have. If you can pull an origin of like, how did they come to you? Why did they come to you? Those can provide a lot of insights into where you need to lean in. We pulled some origin segment codes, and I think all of us had different hypotheses about why people originally came to us. It was very different than any of us expected. We expected events, people coming in through others, and it was vastly in kind that where people started their journey with our organization. So leaning into that of like, okay, people come to us from in kind. How do we now build out a process for that? How do we make sure that they are welcomed and know the other things going on? So being able to start with what you have and gain some insights from there and starting small, especially if you're a smaller organization just starting this, was helpful for us to understand where people are coming from and why.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Those origin segment codes, if you have anything like that in the system that you're using, if you're not using Virtuous, are the absolute key, I think, to figuring it out. On the other hand, though, if you have absolutely nothing in your database, you're kind of working with very little data other than this is how much people have donated. Using a wealth data tool is a really good place to start. Something like a donor search to go and see all of your donors' wealth history, see where they've donated to in the past, what organizations they're affiliated with could be a really great place to, at least if you don't have the data to make very firm decisions, you can make very, very educated guesses with wealth data and start building the data in your database to start collecting origin segment codes now. So next year, you're a little bit more prepared.
And something that I always point out with a lot of organizations, especially some of the younger organizations that are just starting to collect data, just starting to put processes in place, is even a lack of data is a piece of information. If someone just sends in a gift and there is absolutely no origin code sent, what is the follow-up conversation? Hey, we're so excited that you found us. How did you hear about us? That follow-up email. I have a lack of data. Let's solve that. What is the and then? I'm always asking my customers, okay, great. We're going to take care of this step. And then what's going to happen next as we continue to build this relationship? And then it's always a phrase I like to lean on.
I love that. And I think that, like, even just kind of going into that a little bit deeper, because, like, like starting with the fact that, data, being able to see why people have come from us, the way that we're listening to our donors, the way that we're being able to understand what's really important to them. I'd love for you guys just to be able to walk us through that a little bit more, from your experiences. Just walk us through what that process looks like of starting, okay, it's like we have these donors, we're looking to build out this program. Walk us through how you would actually was thinking about segmenting out those and then being able to kind of look at that data and build out another campaign for that.
For us, we started with what we had. Max talked about those origins. And I think we were mostly curious first and foremost about where people came to us from. So like where are the vast majority of people originating? Have they been retained? Are they giving? If they're giving, where is that from? So we were working on the and then, like Tanya mentioned. But first we needed to understand it. So we just pulled that data. It was easy to pull in Virtuous. And understand kind of where people were coming to us. And then what are we going to do about that? How are we going to engage? Like I said, it was very surprising to all of us. So I think it was just starting with what do we have? And that surprised us. So what else could surprise us in terms of our data? And then what do we do about it?
Yeah, I think another important question too to ask yourself too when going through these segments and trying to build these segments is, what do you want as a fundraiser? Like, what kind of asks are you trying to ask for? And to get to those answers, I think some good things to segment out on that you probably do have at some point to some level is giving history, life cycle stage, wealth data, like I mentioned before, if you don't have much on your own CRM. And then leaning into people's communication preferences. So looking at people's forgiving history, looking at people's past giving behaviors, like the amount that they've given and the frequency that they've given, is a really good starting place to help bump people up to the next stage in their donor journey with you. Helping annual givers become quarterly givers become monthly givers, major givers become more frequent, get more frequent pledge commitments, and really just kind of get people more involved based on the commitments that they've already made. So you're asking appropriately. And kind of in the same breath, life cycle stage comes into play too. Like, where are donors in their engagement life cycle with you? New donors will definitely require different communication compared to long-term donors. So segmenting them out is very important, because new donors are going to want a lot more education around your mission, where long-term donors are going to want a little bit more stewardship as to how their dollars have been helping and how more can help even more. And then with communication preferences, it's very common in your database to have people with different types of contact information. You might have a phone number for a bunch of people with no email address, an email address for a bunch of people with no phone number or address. And you want to make sure that you're asking all of those people for, one, that information, because it's super important, but also like for donations. You don't want to be leaving people out just because you don't have their address, but you have their phone number, could totally call them, or you have their email address, could totally email them if you can't send them a direct mail letter. So segmenting people out based on that kind of stuff, as well as if you do have communication preferences listed, like, do people like to receive emails more than mail? Then maybe don't send them a direct mail if they like emails.
Something that I always come back to, because we've got ideas, right? But putting it into action, it all comes back to how you're storing your data. How are you keeping track of phone calls that are made? How are you categorizing major donors? How are you categorizing portfolios? I always bring it back to using automation and internal processes to make sure that you have top confidence. If I'm going to jump in and run a new donor report, I want to know that my data is up to date, that I've got all my things defined, and whatever follow-up action that we're talking about here of sending follow-up emails, follow-up calls, I've got the confidence in my data because I've got these processes just happening behind the scenes for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so true too. Like, especially as you talk about building out a program or, starting any type of new campaign, your first touch point is going to be, or your first, project is going to be the segmentation piece, and really understanding who are we actually reaching out to and why. And really building out those personas as well. Even just being able to build out each persona based on behaviors that they've taken, or maybe like the type of bucket that someone fits into, and like how they like to be stewarded. So being able to build those out actually make a huge difference, and will actually determine your path of how you reach out to them. Because as you talk about building out a program, it's kind of almost twofold. Is there's one, the bucket that you're looking to reach out to get more people to take that step. And then there's also the piece that afterwards, how do we keep engaging with them? How do we keep being able to relay the impact that a donor is making and really create that long-term value? So I love what you guys touched on. I think that's absolutely amazing. I'm curious too, kind of diving in a little bit further. So once you actually have everything segmented out and, you have all your personas built out, how was your thought process about being able to really start to relay that impact and being able to convey that to different types of people, based off of, maybe that they like only direct mail, like you said, or they just, they only give monthly, and that's what they like to do, or somebody that's a first time donor. How would you go about figuring out the donor centric messaging and being able to convey that impact to different types of donors?
I would say starting with, so thinking about, okay, you've pulled your groups of people, whether that's just monetary and non-monetary, or whether you have 6 or 7 different personas of people, is looking at, I think, for Virtuous, we really believe in and have studied heavily the importance of multi-channel or omni-channel, means online and offline. get in touch with your donors both online and offline. It will increase their value, it'll increase their engagement. But within those personas, those groups, is perhaps just splitting them into, hey, these people give online, these people give offline, and meeting them where they're at there. Hey, I'm going to send some digital stuff to these people. I'm going to send an online campaign here. I'm going to have a corresponding direct mail campaign going on over here for these people. And then as they come in, like test it. Did that work? Meeting them where they're at. Maybe have a subset of group where we test something. I'm going to take a percentage of this group and I'm going to mix and match and we're going to see what happens. Taking those and like really defining like, okay, if a donation comes via online, I need to respond online. If a donation comes in via mail, I need to respond via mail, but I also need to be testing if both of them work better. So Tanya can speak to more of that data, actions, like how to do that, but just recognizing that there are subsets of groups who have preferences, but we can also test that out, and it's safe to test it out. Like you should be testing it out. It is okay to take a percentage of those people and have them as your quote unquote guinea pigs so that you can learn your best practices. That's them giving you information on how to best communicate with them.
I always coach organizations through like the campaign process that it's not the end all be all. Year 1 is going to educate, year 2 is going to educate, year 3, year 4, and things are going to change. Whatever works year 1, all right, let's lean into that. But there's probably going to be some things that we need to change year 2. So it's always, what are we doing best? What should we put a little bit more effort into? Change direction? Because we're always listening to our donors, our participants, our volunteers. We're always listening to what they have to say and how they're responding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when it comes to donor-centric communication too, I think a really important thing from a marketing standpoint is to make sure that you're always framing the donor as the hero of the story, because after all, like their dollars are what's funding their mission, and I see that a little too often where people are kind of framing the organization as the hero, and even though the organization is doing a lot of the work and they are the hero, the donor is also the hero, and I think it's sometimes easy to forget that, especially when we're talking like year-end recurring giving, just talking about how like people's donations up to this year have done so much for the rest of the year, and kind of taking time to look back and talk about all the accomplishments that your donors have made this year through you, I think is always a great way to frame those communications and be donor centric.
And the being able to phrase any year-end messaging to reflect whatever behaviors happened this year. If I'm going to send out a batch of recurring asks at the end of the year, I'd like it to be personalized to the people that I'm saying. Thanks so much for your total of $700 in gifts this year. And we would love for you to participate in ABC during this end of year season. I want to be able to tailor those. If someone has not ever given, thanks so much for supporting our mission. We would love for you to join us financially in this season of giving. What are the small little tweaks that you can make to the messaging? And again, like it all comes back to how are you storing your data so that you can very easily say, these are my active recurring donors. These are my lapsed recurring donors. These are my potential recurring donors. How are we going to steward them slightly differently? All in the same direction, of course, but they all have unique journeys with your organization, and those should be honored as we're messaging them as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. In terms of like creating value and being able to drive the impact and really being able to understand, how do we actually build out a recurring giving program? What does that look like? Segmenting out each type of donor based off of, whether they're lapsed or they're active or, just like you said, or maybe like a major gift donor recurring. So those are all play a key factor in different types of what you're going to say, with the channels that you use. So diving into that even a little bit more, when you're going and, say you have somebody that is, a recurring donor or based off of the different personas, how are you, can you guys give an example of maybe sometimes that you like in different types of asks or like the way that you're conveying that impact to those donors continuously on a consistent basis? Is there, examples that you can get from like a campaign or anything like that?
I mean, a great place to start is having that recurring giver program. That like if you have a program set out where they're getting an extra special value from you, whether it's a quarterly newsletter, you're a part of a recurring, like a community, you're a part of a movement, and this is the impact you made this quarter. Here's a story to go along with it, and something to proudly display on your fridge. Like those are different ways to get people involved and provide that value. Thinking about like the in-kind donors, I just wanted to get them to their first monetary gift or coming in to volunteer with us, because then after that I can start identifying, are they primed for maybe a recurring gift program? Did they? For me, I was like, anyone who gives less than $100 for their first gift, I want to welcome them thoroughly, know what they're a part of. But then thinking about responsive fundraising, I want to suggest, hey, do you want to do this on a consistent basis? Do you want to join this community and join this movement? Here's what that's about, and here's why to do it. Those are different ways that you can start to like further a group and provide extra value to, in particular, recurring givers.
Yeah, I think programs are always like having recurring gift membership type of programs are always super successful. Like, and I always think back to those commercials I would see as kids where it's like, adopt a kid or adopt a panda at the zoo. And, you would get like a stuffed animal every here and there, like just as a reminder for your support, which I think is just a great way to steward donors and remind them that what they're doing matters and what they're doing has an impact. I think with that too, like comes messaging, tailoring around that too. So the more specific you could get in your stewardship, especially with recurring donors, the better. If we're talking about, maybe funding kids with school supplies, like if someone's donating $30 a month instead of every month saying like, hey, this month you bought a backpack for Susie. Like if you could really tailor the messaging to be filling a recurring need, like with your $30 a month, 4 classrooms now have pencils where kids were being asked to bring their own pencils before, but they couldn't afford pencils. And now like you are providing pencils for them as long as you are donating. I think really honing into that everlasting impact of recurring donations in your stewardship is always really successful.
I completely agree. And we just did a recent study with Next After, who dived into a lot of the different benchmark statistics around recurring giving and what that looks like. And actually, when it comes to recurring giving and focusing on value-based messaging, they did a comparison of a donation page with very minimal copy, like a recurring, it was the ask of like the recurring giving and to be able to give. And they gave it with no copy, no nothing, just very minimal page versus a page that was able to have very clear value proposition of, hey, why am I the ideal donor to give? They answered that question on the donation page, and they saw a 116 increase in donations just from adding that messaging. So going back to Katie's point even earlier, don't be afraid to test. Like going and it's all about being able to do different types of A/B testing and understanding, does this messaging work better or does this messaging work better? And understanding what actually is compelling someone to give and what type of messaging is actually showcasing someone to take action. But as we dive into a little bit further, say somebody does take that action, what channels would you guys leverage in order to be able to steward someone? What does that donor journey look like? I know Tanya is going to get into that here in a little bit later, but what does that actual journey look like for someone? Can you give an example and just talk about some of the different channels that you guys would leverage and how you'd leverage them?
Yeah, I could start with just talking about your organization's website. In my last job, I ran a big multi-year project of completely regutting our website and figuring out how websites run best. And I found a few really cool things because your website's probably where people are first hearing about you, and it's probably the first place that they're going to interact with you as an organization. So you want to make sure that all of the information there is tailored to meet their needs and that they're able to find what they want. I think when we're talking about creating your website, making things very easy to find is key. Within a fraction of a second, somebody should be able to locate where your donation button is on your donation form on your website. Like people need to know how to donate in well less than a second of being on your page. And from there, it shouldn't take them more than a couple clicks to actually get through the donation process. Because each click that someone's making on your website is a decision in their head that they're making of like, do I want to do this? And you want to make sure that you're giving them as little decisions as possible to make the donation, just to make their lives a little bit easier. So they're not making 100 decisions just to make the one big decision of donating, because they want to in the first place. So we just want to make it really, really easy. I think a really big thing to leverage too when you're talking about your website presence and your communications is custom URL parameters with Virtuous, where when, or that's with Virtuous, but a lot of other form builders have too, if you guys aren't using Virtuous yet, where you could have links that go to a donation form and pre-fill out specific information, making the donors' lives a lot easier. You know, if you're asking for a specific amount, including the amount in that link. If it's tied to a campaign, already including the campaign in that link so that it automatically gets filled out in the donation form, so that people are having a much easier time getting through the donation process, which should increase your conversions.
That's actually one of my favorite features to teach, because I'm working with the people who are the engine behind all of the technology. They're the owners behind it. And while we want to open up as many specific doors for people to walk through and we'd be able to capture all that data, we don't want to put a mountain of work on us internally as like nonprofit workers. As like, we're limited, we're very limited. So leaning into strategic ways of gathering a lot of data that's got just ton of wealth behind it without bogging down our team with a ton of manual work. How do we use certain features to bridge the gap between that?
Yeah, I love that. And it's so important too. I knew that when we did a study with Next After too, that we saw the importance of multi-channel and being able to leverage different aspects. So like your website, being able to leverage email, being able to leverage text message, all of those different things, postcard, wherever you're at. But we saw actually with Next After, when we conducted a study on the orgs that were using multi-channel during year end, saw that there was a 300 increase in lifetime value of donor when using multi-channel to steward them during year end. So when you're thinking about building out your recurring gift program, thinking about what are some of the ways that we want to engage with these people and continue building impact afterwards, and leveraging different channels to do that. So maybe even doing a milestone giving, once they've hit, maybe they don't even realize they're just giving $50 a month, and being able to say maybe in a year, it's like, or maybe you want to set a criteria for $1,000. It's like, hey, your last gift actually just set us over for $1,000, and sending them a thank you, or sending like a personalized video. So there's a ton of different ways that you're able to engage donors and create that value that they might not even realize, and saying, hey, you have fed 5,000 families with your donations for the past year. So we would really love to, continue that relationship, and looking forward to that. So there's a ton of different things that you can do and leverage multi-channel through that, which I think is so cool. And I would love to oh, sorry, Kay, was there something you were going to say?
No, yes, I was thinking of, so for like recurring donors and thinking about, summarizing your year. I hope that all of your technologies are able to very easily pull the history of every single donor throughout the year. Because that's a great way at the end of the year. Hey, did you know you gave 6 out of the last 12 months? You should become a recurring donor because you already are. But here's the value of becoming a solid recurring donor, of like making it official. Here's what it means to us. Here's what it means to you. And here's how to make it really, really easy on yourself to continue doing what you've done. So you can start to summarize that way of, how have our givers given this year? How many times did they give? How much money did they give? And for Arizona, we have a tax credit. Many states have a tax credit. For us, it was very easy for our lower level donors to say, spread out your tax credit throughout the year. You don't need to give one chunk of $400 or $800. Did you know that you could spread it out throughout the year, so that by the end of the year, you have your tax credit, and then you recur for us? Another cool thing that I learned at the Next After study is, default your recurring donors to ACH. People change bank accounts far less than they change credit cards. So that's just one way for you to be able to way easier, like not mess with the credit card expirations, default to ACH so that it just comes out of their bank account right away. I thought that was a really nifty little tip.
I
Yeah,
love
and
that.
would you mind if I share one other tip, Allie?
No, go for it.
Too okay, cool, and not to I'm kind of upset that I'm going after Katie because I think what Katie said is a lot more important than what I'm about to say. Um, but but I think something when you're building a recurring gift program or really any gift program and talking about multi-channel is to really be thinking about the different stories and communications that you're putting out and giving
Mm,
appropriate asks on there. I think back to what Katie said again earlier in this webinar where she was talking about you need to ask donors to participate and to engage. And if we're, writing success stories about our mission and how our mission has helped, I mean, going back to my example before, like classrooms get school supplies. And if we wrote a blog post on like, this is why pencils are important and why it's hard to, it's hard for people to bring their own pencils. If we had a recurring gift ask right in there of like, give $10 a month to help give one classroom pencils, and just making sure that you're asking in each communication, but you're not just asking for a donation because that could be seen as a little lazy sometimes, depending on the communication that you're sending out, like asking for a specific donation related to the need. Because if someone read through your whole piece of collateral, they were probably very interested. They were probably very moved. And that's a really good time to convert them into a donor for that cause.
yeah. I love that. I think that's true. Even, like you talk about, it's like you've given, it's a great time for year end. It's like, hey, you've given, this amount. It's like, would you consider being a reoccurring monthly giver and donating just maybe even $10 more? Or just like $10 a month, and you could be able to give this many pencils throughout the year. And I think that's really when you're thinking about reoccurring giving is understanding how do we it's the long-term value that we're trying to be able to create and help our donors being able to understand how they're connected to that long-term value if they're seeing long-term change. So incremental gifts over a long period of time being able to create that substantial change. And I think that that's a really good like point as we're going in. You're having first time gift donors being able to enter in. We see a large influx of first time gift donors. It's like, hey, it's like, just to Katie's point, would you consider, spreading this out throughout the year and being a reoccurring giver? And I think that just being able to have that impact is really important. I'd love to kind of like go on this thread though, but even more specifically in diving in, how do you guys think that, can you guys give an example of like maybe a successful campaign and understanding, how does technology play a role in that long-term value and where you guys kind of saw that, like maybe some of a successful campaign or maybe something that you thought you wish you would have learned in hindsight looking back?
So many things.
Let's take it off.
I think testing more. Once I left nonprofit to come to Virtuous, we launched A/B testing, like really fully launched A/B testing as a part of everyone's platform. And I got to conduct one A/B test, and I wish I would have done that more. I wish I would have paid more attention to Next After and their tests that have been done, that kind of give me kind of, if I can't test it on my own, they've tested it and maybe I can use some of that. Finding my own best practices with these it was really, really important to me because as you all know, there are best practices everywhere. There are suggestions everywhere. But what I wanted to know is what my donors cared about and how my donors wanted to be treated and what would work best with my group of donors. So I think going back and testing more and testing simply, here's one ask versus another, here's one subject line versus another for recurring giving in particular would have been really beneficial.
Yeah, I think like looking back at a lot of the campaigns that I've run, there are a few things I kind of want to highlight on some of the things I wish I did differently because I think there's a lot to learn from that, especially because I was very young in my career when I was doing nonprofit work. So like I was learning constantly. And things I learned from that I either like got to test out and worked great or just things I wish I did were we talked about like URL parameters earlier, but just doing anything to make donors' lives easier when we're talking recurring donation programs, like really giving people a place to start recurring donations. It might not be a button on your website that's super public, but at least a link that you're sending out that goes to a recurring donation page gives a lot of the information on this is why recurring donations are really beneficial and this is the value that you're going to be bringing. Having pre-built pre-filled information, like I said earlier, to get this frequency in already, the dollar amount if you're asking for something specific like pencils, and really making the donor journey through the website a lot easier is something that I wish I did a lot when managing recurring giving campaigns. Um, I think another big thing, and we kind of touched on it, is just making sure that your asks are appropriate. I've seen a lot of times where, and I've alluded to it earlier today too, but like where we ask a donor for too much and they get, you know, embarrassed or kind of turned off by our mission because they don't think they're able to help us because they don't think they can afford it because we're asking for too much. And I've also seen times where we have asked donors for too little and we could have really done a lot of great work with their money and they could have been very much more invested in our mission, happy with what they're able to do with their donations since we didn't ask for enough. So I think going back and really using wealth data to your advantage, if you have access to that, is huge. And being able to go through giving history and make really appropriate gift asks. Most nonprofit technologies have built-in software to help you make gift asks. I know in Virtuous, we have smart gift arrays that'll help make sure that your gift asks are very on point. I've seen them in other nonprofit softwares. If you do a quick Google search, you'll find a lot of different, like just custom pen paper math people do to calculate these numbers too, which is also very effective. I think just as long as it's really taking into account giving history and any data that you have, you'll get some really good numbers to make sure you're asking for the right amount.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's good to see in terms of like, technology and how that can help you actually really support you in your recurring gift program. I know we have some questions. I want to make sure that we leave a little bit of room for Tanya to be able to showcase, because there is a big leverage in being able to have all of your data and have all of your technology working hand in hand with your strategy and your program to really help you make sure that you are successful, being able to help you understand where you can improve and things like that. So I'm going to pass it over to Tanya. She's going to actually showcase what all of a reoccurring program could look like through technology and being able to show you when it's all working together, and what that looks like. So Tanya, I'll pass it over to you.
Awesome. All right. So I have a handful of examples ready for us today. And something that I want to touch on is some organizations are on a very complex end of the spectrum and some organizations are on the less complex end. So I've got a little bit on each side. In this particular automation, let me rewind for a second. Automation is the key. When we have this large idea and this general strategy, pathway, journey, whatever we want to call it, we can use automation to guide that journey. Again, like I mentioned earlier, without putting a mountain of tasks on every single employee's plate. I want things to be brought to my attention when certain thresholds, certain criteria, certain timing happens that I've already put into place. In this automation example here, I've got a journey that will take someone who has sent in their very first gift, and it will send a series of emails. Welcome. We're so excited. Thank you. You'll very quickly learn I'm not a marketing professional, so my messaging examples, very two-dimensional. But we've got our welcome series. Who's going to be calling? Do we have any portfolios that we need to consider as far as assigning, like farming those out? But we've got this journey that brings them into the fold, the welcome. Maybe we've got a welcome video that goes out later on. And you'll notice that I've got these delays in here because I am keeping a pace for this journey. And I'm using the word pace very broadly because if I send in my first donation today, my journey starts right now. If my next door neighbor sends their first donation in 7 weeks, they're going to have a very similar journey, but it starts at a different time. Similar pacing, of course, similar messaging, but there might be differences in there. I might not know that my next door neighbor is a millionaire, so he's going to drop over into a potential major donor, whereas that's not quite my lane. So I'm going to have some different messaging. Similar journey. We're stewarding them to increase their engagement with our organization. In this particular example, we're asking them for a recurring gift. Hey, we would love for you to start supporting us in a sustaining manner. If we have our first email go out, we've got our delay. Again, that pacing. We want to make sure that we're aware of the journey, like that full experience that's happening from the donor's perspective. I've got a second gift ask. I've got different categories within. And this comes back to what we were talking about early in our session is how do we define different groups? What is a major donor? What's a potential major donor? If we just use those terms as like nebulous, just like, oh, people who donate large amounts, we're going to have a constantly moving target. But if we define our major donors as any donor who has given a single gift of $5,000 or more, we can absolutely do that as well. And I've got this wonderful query example. And here I'm targeting potential major recurring donors. So I'm looking for households that are not currently tagged as major donors. They've got a life to date giving and some financial scores. This is only scratching the surface of the type of data I can blend into this criteria here. I can also enter in event data. Have they ever participated in an event? Have they ever volunteered? Do we have any in-kind giving? All of the different pieces of data that exist in my CRM can be utilized to further specify messaging and the ultimate journey that we're trying to steward someone through. So I've mentioned it a million times now. It all comes back to how are we storing our data? How are we categorizing our data? And while I've shown first this new donor to recurring stewardship, I've also got a lot of tabs open, so stand by. I've also got a donor life cycle. So my organization might not have the capacity to have, 9 different workflows that are populating tons of tasks. And maybe we're a smaller organization and we want to keep track of the life cycle. I've got a similar approach of stewarding someone towards their second gift, their recurring gift, becoming a major donor. It's just not as exhaustive because my organization might be at a different stage 1 than that other organization. We always want to keep in mind, like I mentioned in the chat, your stage 1 might be different than another organization. So this donor life cycle might be stage 1 of gathering information, figuring out exactly where everyone is in their life cycle before we move forward with confidence of saying, all right, we know where they're at. Where do we want them to be? What messaging is going to get us to that point? Something else that Katie mentioned is being able to easily access information. So we're talking about putting a lot of asks out into the world, having all the appropriate tracking to make sure that we keep the data of why these asks are coming back, these successful asks and or unsuccessful asks, kind of coming back to that idea of a lack of data. I want to be able to very easily look at a list of new donors. It should not take me more than a couple of clicks because I want to call them. I want to email them. I want to do something with this. I don't want to spend hours trying to figure out this data. So in Virtuous, I can lean on my new donor report. It is a canned report, just in a dropdown. You hit enter. It's pretty great. Or maybe I am a major gift officer and I want to keep track of all of my major donors and what's been going on, life to date, their last gift, whatever that is. I, of course, want to have easy access to it. So again, how are we storing our data? How is our data being maintained? Beyond just marketing emails, automation also has the power to help us manage our data, adding tags, removing tags, making sure that every single day everything's getting refreshed. So if I log on at 10 a.m. and I'm about to send out some assignments to a bunch of major gift officers, I want to know that the most current giving data is in Virtuous. So all of it is down to data, but getting creative and specific with your data. Potential major donors, recurring major donors, new major donors. I want all of these things. I want to be able to track all of these things, and then I want to be able to follow up. We have that idea of, and then. So in this end of year new donor, this messaging is going to be slightly different from my general new donor welcome series. Thanks so much for sending in your first gift during this giving season. Again, not a marketing professional, not a great example, but it's a small reflection that says we recognize that your first gift came in response to this specific ask. How can we always take things a step further than where we're at right now? What's the next question that we want to ask? And one more thing that I want to mention is don't be afraid to ask. And not just in the sense of like, don't be afraid to ask for a donation, but don't be afraid to ask for preferences, for information. Sending someone a lead form and saying, hey, we want to get to know you better so that we can better tailor your journey with us. Me personally, that's great. I would love to get more specific information in my inbox. If I'm interested in ABC projects and we've got A through Z projects, being able to focus messaging to those three, beautiful. That's what I'm interested in. Let's lean into that. Don't be afraid to ask for information. I think I'll leave it there. There's a lot more I'm obviously a product trainer. I could speak on this for days. So all of that eventually comes back to how are you storing your data? How are you maintaining your data? And then how are you using that data to make educated moves, educated actions, pushing people into the and then idea there.
Tanya, is there a way that we can see, let's say the question from Kelly, is there a way that you can see the queries that you use to set up the automations?
I know we're sending out some post material. I can get some screenshots together that have some really great examples of inclusion, exclusion. I haven't even talked about like, what are your exclusion ideas? Like, yes, we want to get people moving, but do we have a different approach for major donors? Do we have a different approach for people who only give via pass-through? All of those pieces, inclusion, exclusion, when was their last gift? Yeah, I'll whip up some examples so we can share that out.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Tanya, for sharing all that, and Katie and Max for coming on. I know we've got a few minutes left, so if there's any other last minute questions, we would love to be able to help answer those, or if there's just anything that you guys found to be working for you guys that you're like, hey, I found this to be really successful and want to share with the group, we'd love to surface that and elevate that as well. But no, we really want this to be a hopefully this is helpful and being able to surface, feel like give you a different perspective of, this is maybe where you can start to being able to build out your recurring program, or maybe just adding another thing. And I see there's a comment in the chat. It's like feeling just overwhelmed. Don't definitely start with where you're at. That's one thing where this is a lot of information to take in. Yes, Katie, crawl, walk, run. That is definitely our approach. So whether you're just starting out or you already have a recurring gift program that you're looking to maybe just add a few extra steps in, start with where you are. Don't compare yourself to, being able having the most robust recurring gift program. So I would say start with where you're at and just taking one foot and putting it in front of the other and being able to say, okay, these are my donors. Maybe start with understanding why somebody gave and being able to work backwards from there. And let's see.
Something I always preach is the staged approach. Maybe we've got a perfect vision of what stage 5 is going to look like. Mm-hmm. What are the key features of stage 5? How do we get the data to make that happen? Let's build out stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Yes. Like I mentioned earlier, the campaign structure in Virtuous lends itself to figuring out what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, retooling how we're using our efforts, making sure that we're listening to all of our donors, volunteers, time, talent, treasure. How are we going to make the next best step based off of the data that we're gathering?
Absolutely. And it's a question from Debbie about mentioning the study. So we did the study with Next After it was the online donor retention benchmark study. And I'm actually going to surface here in the chat again as well. But feel free to download this benchmark report, Next After, check them out. They're awesome. But they went into a whole study around reoccurring giving and how the way to leverage recurring giving, as well as having it's the combination of recurring giving and value-centric messaging that really makes a big impact. And so when we're talking about the donation page, they did that study where they had absolutely nothing on the donation page when people would click on there. It was just the giving form. And then they added a few different tiers of saying, hey, this is what a gift can do for, if you make this gift, this is what it can do for your organization. And they added a few extra tiers in there as well, showing that if you just went up another $10, this is what your gift could do. If you went up another $100, this is what your gift could do. And they kept it very clear, very precise. And you can check out that example in there and get more information on that study. So I definitely recommend downloading that as well. But yeah, it was very cool. And so you guys can check out that study. Also, the other thing I'd recommend too is that if you're just starting out and looking like, how do I even begin to segment my donors? Where do I start from here? We have a step-by-step guide on building out a donor journey, and you're able to break it down. It'll explain all of the different personas, all of the different channels that you can leverage, and is a template. And so I'll surface that here as well. So you're able to download that and create your own donor journey, regardless of what tools you're using. So it is not Virtuous specific. It is open to everyone and completely product agnostic. Is there a list of basic automated email tasks? I probably should have like a welcome series.
I just jumped in on that one. There are some best practice workflows in Virtuous. I recognize you guys as a Virtuous customer, so I made the assumption. But you can lean on those as a springboard. In full transparency, they are a starting place, bit of a skeleton, because every single organization works differently. So it might be more than you're looking for. It might be a little bit less than what you're looking for. But starting from those best practice workflows is a great way to skip some steps and just kind of dive into a little bit more of the specifications there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recommend even just like starting off, even if you have like no workflows in place, just starting off with a new donor welcome series is an easy one. So even just being able to set up a couple emails for a new donor welcome series, I think is a great place to start, and getting that off the ground. So if you're using Virtuous, being able to talk to your customer success manager and helping them walk you through that as well. So, but it looks like we're at time. So I'll go ahead. I want to give everyone back time in their day. So thank you all, everyone, for hopping on. Max, Katie, and Tanya, thank you so much for participating. Everyone, thank you so much for logging on and joining the conversation today. So we'll be following up with the recording and sending all of the resources as well. Also, feel free to personally reach out to any one of us if you have any other questions. We're always happy to help and connect one-on-one. So thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.